The story begins with an orphan boy named Rudo who lives in the slums and has the hobby of stealing trash from rich people's dumpsters. This world is divided into the white-walled city, where the rich and wealthy live, while filthy trash like Rudo lives in the black slums outside. In this world, there is a legend that every object has a soul, and it shows its true potential if you care for it enough, which makes it precious. But the rich throw away anything that's even a little used, and all of it ends up at a massive trash collecting site, which ultimately gets thrown into the great pit along with the people who have committed crimes. One day, on the rich side, a woman tells her daughter to toss out her stuffed toy after it gets a little damaged. She says fixing it will only make it look ugly, and they can always buy a new one. Hearing this, the little girl wipes her face and throws it away without a second thought as she starts talking about wanting a kitty cat for her next one. After that, her mom packs up all the trash and drops it into an underground vent, where it ends up in a garbage truck. The truck reaches the collection site, and Rudo jumps off on his way into one of the side rooms to look for anything usable. There, he accidentally makes too much noise for the guard to notice. The guard quickly breaks in and points his gun at the boy, asking if he is the infamous trash raider, and then smashes that alarm button to call for backup. Rudo grabs whatever junk is closest and flings it at the guards. A few rotten eggs splatter across their spotless uniforms, and that alone is enough to leave them frozen in place, too disgusted to react. While they stand there in shock, Rudo climbs back up the vent without even looking back. He reaches the surface near the exit, but his luck turns as the gate slams shut right in front of him. Before he can come up with a backup plan, more guards rush in and open fire. Rudo dodges through the chaos and sprints toward the wall. A bullet grazes his arm, but he still manages to vault over and disappear into the shadows. From behind, the guards shout that they can't let a kid get away, but by then, Rudo has already crawled through a sewer tunnel. Bruised and annoyed, he mutters to himself how ridiculous it is that the rich protect their garbage like it's some kind of national treasure. The next day, news about the trash raider spreads like wildfire. The elites find it hard to believe someone would actually go through the trouble of stealing garbage. When they spot Rudo's adoptive father from the slums, they look at him with disgust and say that slum people should just stay on their own side. On the other side of the wall, the poor people already know who is behind all the commotion, and they pray that the annoying kid kicks the bucket before he ends up driving the guards to them. But Rudo doesn't care at all and keeps fixing the junk he collected. Just then, his friend Chua shows up and scolds him for going after trash again because she's worried that something bad might finally happen if the trash management catches him. Rudo tells her the rich keep throwing out perfectly good stuff, and he simply uses that to make a living by fixing and selling them to the people in the slums who might actually appreciate them. Right then, a group of bullies shows up to make fun of him and say they finally found the source of the awful stink in the area. They even tell Chua to stop hanging out with him before she ends up smelling like garbage too. One of them knocks over Rudo's stuff and says no one's ever going to buy any of it. They mock his hands too and say they're so nasty he needs dirty gloves just to hide them. Rudo stays quiet through all the bullying, but the second they call him the son of a crazy murderer, something inside him snaps. The bullies start bragging about how the slums were built to trap criminals like him and how they're trying to fix that by earning back some respect. But they say Rudo's father ruined everything they've worked for with his serial killer reputation. Rudo gives them a nasty look that makes them flinch, so they throw in one last insult about how he'll probably turn out just like his dad, then run off in a panic. After they're gone, Chua walks up and tries to calm him down. She says she still believes in him. Then her eyes land on the same stuffed toy from earlier, and she smiles, amazed at how good it looks now. Rudo says it's not for sale, but just as he's about to give it to her, Chua's mom shows up and yanks her away. She scolds her for hanging around with that weirdo again. Feeling crushed, Rudo goes home to see his foster father, Recto, who starts teasing him by copying the way he acted in jokes about how Rudo was trying to flirt by giving the toy to that cute girl. Rudo turns red from embarrassment because he didn't even realize he was being watched. The old man brings up Rudo's trash diving and says they're not so poor that he needs to go that far. He asks him to leave that kind of work to him until he's older, and reminds him how dangerous it was last night. Rector thinks Rudo might feel like he owes him something for taking him in, but Rudo says that's not it. He just wants to do his part as family. The conversation shifts to Chua, and Recto tells him to be a little more honest with her. Then he notices the cut on Rudo's arm and starts patching it up. While doing that, he asks Rudo to take off his gloves too. Once he does, his pitch black arms are exposed. Rudo blames them on his real father, the one who was sentenced to death and thrown into the pit. He says he's had to deal with everything alone, getting judged for how he looks, and that his hands hurt all the time. But ever since the day Recto gave him those gloves, things have felt a bit easier. After wrapping up the first aid, the old man gently pushes him again to tell Chua how he really feels before someone else wins her over. Meanwhile, outside the house, a mysterious figure spends the night quietly watching them. The next day, after getting a quick lesson in how to smile from Recto, Rudo builds up his courage and heads off to find Chua. On the way, he catches sight of a man being thrown into the pit while people nearby shout cruel names at him. It makes him wonder what actually happens to the ones who get tossed down there. Just then, Chua greets him with a cheerful good morning. He quickly hides the stuffed toy behind his back, and she quietly mentions how sad it is that everyone's forced to watch the executions, even if they don't want to. She tells him she doesn't want to see him end up like that someday and says if he keeps risking his life, that awful future might actually happen. Rudo shrugs and says Recto always nags him about the same thing, but Chua just smiles and tells him that it probably means the old man cares about him as much as she does. The words slip out before she can catch them, and once they do, the two go quiet. Rudo's face turns red, but he holds out the stuffed toy and nervously says he hopes she'll like it even if it came from the dumpsters. Chua looks at it with sparkling eyes and says she'll treasure it forever. Blushing like crazy, Rudo spins around and races back, eager to show Recto and tell him everything. But as he turns a corner and rushes through the front door, he skids to a stop. A masked man is standing inside the house and Recto is on the floor, a sword plunged deep into his chest. Rudo rushes toward the masked man, desperate to save Recto, but the attacker easily knocks him aside and slams him into the wall. Rudo tries to get back on his feet, barely holding on, and watches as the man calmly picks up a book and walks away. Recto tries to speak. When Rudo promises to help him survive, the old man uses his final breath to shout at him, telling him to run away and change this garbage world. Just as Recto goes still, the guards arrive. They take one look at Rudo, covered in blood, and assume the worst. Recto, the only person who ever treated him like family, is gone. Rudo tries to speak up to tell them what really happened, but one of the guards punches him in the face and knocks him out before he can say a word. Later, the slums are filled with whispers. A crowd gathers around the house. Some curse his name, calling him a monster. Even Chua is shaken and confused and wonders if he could really be guilty. Rudo is brought to the execution site. Tied up high above the ground, he listens in silence as a priest gives a slow, formal speech. The man says that a murderer has no place in their land and must be thrown into the pit. Below, the people begin chanting, treating him like nothing more than trash. Rudo can barely process what is happening. He scans the crowd, hoping someone might stand up for him. When he sees Chua, he gathers what strength he has left and cries out to her, begging her to believe him. He swears that Recto was murdered and begs her to find the real killer. But instead, Chua calls him a murderer, just like his father, and throws away his stuffed toy before running off. After that, the crowd starts chanting and calling him the scum of society. Seeing this, Rudo breaks down and starts laughing like a madman, thinking these people are the real scum with no minds of their own. Just as the head priest gives the order to throw him away, Rudo spots the real killer standing in the crowd. But by then, it's already too late. The guards drag him toward the pit, and as he falls, he quietly swears to make every single one of these people pay and drag them all to hell. During the fall, he suddenly feels something strange, and then everything goes dark. Later, when he finally wakes up, Rudo finds himself lying in a pile of garbage that smells worse than anything he's ever known. As he turns around, he sees a massive trash monster made from all the junk people threw down. Seeing that, he starts panicking and thinks that this must be what hell looks like. At that moment, Rudo remembers how, ever since he was a kid, he always found it strange that the rich kept talking about crime and filth, but never stopped to wonder what happens to the trash once it's thrown into the pit. That thought makes his blood boil. He gets angry thinking about all the fools who call him a monster, even though they have never seen the real monsters themselves. Back in the pit, the giant trash beast chasing him suddenly stops and lets out a loud roar. That sound echoes through the area and draws more monsters toward him. Soon, they start to surround him from all sides. As they close in, he wonders what these things even are, because trash should not be crawling around like wild animals. He barely manages to jump out of the way and keeps running, but ends up tripping and landing face first right beside a rotten skull. His whole body hurts, and the situation feels hopeless. Fueled by frustration, he curses the people who threw him down here. Just then, the pile beneath him gives out and he falls again. When he hits the bottom, his body is covered in scrapes and bruises, and the air is so filthy that every breath feels like it is cutting up his lungs. He tries to cover his nose and looks around for even a small place to rest, but it finally hits him that there is no safe place here, and the only thing still alive in this world is the garbage itself. Rudo coughs up so much blood that even the trash monster seems to hesitate, slowly creeping closer to put him out of his misery. In that moment, Rudo thinks this is the end he deserves. But just as he's about to pass out, he sees Recto's final moments flashing in his mind. That memory jolts something awake inside him. Suddenly, he sees glowing objects scattered all around. Without thinking, he reaches for the closest one, which turns out to be a crowbar. As he grips the handle tight, he looks up toward the sphere where he once lived and starts making a revenge list in his head. Every person who ever treated him like garbage makes the list, but at the very top is the man who murdered Recto and walked away without a care in the world. With a burst of strength, he swings the crowbar and smashes it into the trash monster. He swears to himself that he's going to stay alive, no matter what it takes, just so he can beat the guts out of that criminal. Not far from him, a man sitting on a throne made of garbage watches the scene unfold. He leans forward, impressed to see a newcomer charging and while covered in blood from head to toe. Rudo shouts that the monster stinks worse than Recto's farts and lands a solid hit, but the beast strikes back hard. It slams him into a nearby tower and nearly crushes him under the rubble. Before the dust can settle, Rudo grabs a bigger metal rod and throws it like a boomerang straight at the monster's face. Just then, one of the monsters jumps out from below and lands a hit, leaving Rudo in such bad shape that he can't stop coughing up blood. As the creatures move in to finish the job, something inside him surges again. Right before they pounce, he locks onto them and fights back. He cuts off their arms, then grabs a steel plate and slices one of them clean in half. The monster explodes behind him as he walks out the other side. With the danger gone, Rudo falls to his knees, completely drained and once again feeling hopeless. But his bad luck isn't over yet. A bigger, nastier monster spawns behind him and lets out a roar that summons even more backup. Rudo takes off across the hills of trash, but the monster slams the ground and sends out a shockwave that launches him through the air like a rag doll. When he opens his eyes, he sees a strange man holding an umbrella over him. Confused, Rudo stares as the masked man calmly lifts him up by the hood and tosses him aside, which makes him cough up even more blood. Without saying a word, the man straps a breathing mask over Rudo's face to help him recover, then steps forward to shield him like a hero. Still trying to make sense of what's happening, Rudo throws out a bunch of questions. The man simply holds up a hand to signal him to hutch, which only makes Rudo more irritated. The guy politely tells him to stay quiet again. Rudo gets louder and demands to know what kind of nightmare they're in, but the man says they're not underground and seriously asks him to calm down. Not able to hear the masked guy's voice, Rudo shouts that he doesn't understand a word. That finally pushes the man over the edge and he yells back, calling Rudo a brain-dead monkey who needs to stop screaming. He gets mad because now every monster nearby is heading their way thanks to Rudo's loud mouth. Then he explains that these creatures are called trash beasts, and unless they're taken out with a special weapon, they'll just respawn. As the monsters draw closer, the masked man keeps talking like it's no big deal. Then, right before the creatures strike, his umbrella begins to glow and sharp blades pop out from the top. Without warning, he spins the umbrella and slices the trash beast into tiny pieces that scatter through the air. Rudo watches the shredded parts turn into dust and realizes that the umbrella is one of those special weapons the guy was talking about. But there's no time to think. More monsters show up and the masked man charges in without hesitation. The first monster explodes the second he touches it, and after that, he jumps from one to another at a speed so fast that Rudo can't even keep track. Watching him land smoothly and float down with the umbrella like a parachute, Rudo feels a mix of awe and envy as he thinks that this is exactly the kind of power he needs if he's ever going to get revenge for Recto. Just then, one of the trash monsters builds up a dark sludge attack in its mouth and fires it at them. But the masked man blocks it with his umbrella just in time, and the sludge explodes on impact. Without missing a beat, he leaps onto the monster's head and uses a special move called Octa Shredder, which drills through the monster's skull like a jackhammer until it completely breaks apart. After the fight, he walks over to check on Rudo and looks a little surprised that the noisy kid is still alive. When Rudo weakly asks who he is, the man removes his mask and says his name is Engine from the Cleaners. But the moment he catches a whiff of Rudo, who smells like an old man's diaper, he quickly puts the mask back on, and by then Rudo finally passes out. In his dreams, Rudo finds himself remembering a time when he came home covered in mud after getting bullied again. He had told Recto that it happened because he spoke about objects having feelings. Recto, rather than getting upset, smiled and said he was proud that Rudo didn't fight back. But Rudo still looked at him and said he believed that things people take care of do come alive, just like Recto once told him. Hearing that, Recto scratched his head and admitted the story wasn't meant to be taken literally, explaining that it was just an old legend to help kids understand the importance of looking after their belongings. But Rudo didn't seem to mind and looked around their cluttered little home before asking if all the things around them had a soul too, and that made Recto chuckle as he looked at the curious boy in front of him. Back in the present, Rudo wakes up and finds himself tied up in chains. He immediately starts cursing Engine for tricking him, but Engine calmly replies that it's a pretty rude way to talk to someone who just saved his life. He explains that the only reason he tied him up was because there was no other way to carry in while he was passed out. Hearing that, Rudo tells him to untie him now that he's awake because he has more important things to do. He says he needs to find the scumbag who murdered Recto and get revenge. Engine pauses for a moment before giving him a bit of a reality check, saying that going back isn't possible right now. He explains that the world Rudo came from is called the Sphere, and it floats far up in the sky, constantly moving, which makes reaching it impossible for now. Rudo catches on to what he said and points out that the word now means it might still be possible someday. He gets fired up and starts yelling at Engine to tell him everything about the Sphere, the monsters, and the strange power he used. He says he's not going to stay quiet until he gets all the answers he needs to make Recto's killer pay. Tired of hearing him yell non-stop, Engine finally loses patience and tosses his mask aside, telling Rudo it's time for him to learn what the pit is really like. Without explaining anything, he grabs Rudo and drags him like a dog across the wasteland until they reach a deserted area. There he throws him out into the open and tells him to enjoy the stay. Rudo starts yelling that he hasn't even been told what the lesson is supposed to be, but he quickly goes quiet when he notices a group of masked people staring straight at him. One of them, a guy in a red shirt, starts going wild the moment he sees a kid. He drools a little and wonders out loud if this is his lucky day. Taking a good look at Rudo's clothes, he guesses the kid might be from the sphere, although the others are skeptical. Red Shirt asks where he came from, and when Rudo says he fell from above, the whole group throws off their masks and rushes over to him, practically bursting with excitement. At first, they think he's lying because a real spherate shouldn't understand their language, but Red Shirt leans in and touches Rudo's face just to be sure, which creeps him out badly. Then, out of nowhere, Red Shirt apologizes and offers to unchain him because he feels bad for what Rudo must have gone through. For a moment, Rudo starts to believe he might have actually found some decent people, unlike Engine. That changes real fast when Rudo finds himself scammed and tied up in the back of a truck. The masked gang watches him struggle with big smiles because spherats like him are worth millions, and they can't afford to let him go. Then Red Shirt makes a creepy face and explains why people are willing to pay so much. It all hates spherats for dumping endless trash that poisons the air and makes life harder down here. Just breathing hurts, and monsters that don't die destroy homes and crush families. So when someone from the sphere shows up, the only thing people want is to make him suffer for as long as possible. After saying that, Red Shirt gets excited to torture Rudo, but for now, he needs to keep him alive. So he stuffs rotten food into his mouth just to see him suffer, thinking it must be pure agony for a spoiled kid from above. But to his horror, Rudo skins the flesh off his fingers with his teeth, eats the disgusting food like it's nothing, and glares back. Tired of being mocked and given dumb nicknames, Rudo gets so angry that his gloves activate. He breaks the chains and says he's done taking trash from anyone. Watching from a distance, Engine confirms what he suspected. Rudo is a giver, one of the rare humans who can bring objects to life. The gang panics and tries to tie him up again, thinking the chains must be his weapon. But Rudo shuts them up when transforms a nearby tire, shocking everyone around him since givers aren't supposed to have more than one object. After he takes out the rest of the thugs, Rudo moves in to finish off Red Shirt for good, but Engine steps in and stops him just in time. That moment snaps Rudo back to his senses, and he suddenly remembers Recto's words about taking care of his gloves. Engine realizes he pushed the kid too far and apologizes, saying he only wanted to see if Rudo truly had the power. Now that he knows the truth, he promises to tell Rudo everything if he agrees to fight alongside the cleaners. Later, in a dry and broken wasteland, a guy sitting on a rooftop sighs when he gets a message from Engine. But Engine promises he's found a real natural talent who is lost in no man's land. While a bald doctor patches up Rudo, Engine tells the man that he's never seen powers like this before and says he'll introduce the recruits soon. Rudo quickly cuts in and says he never agreed to join anything, but before he can keep talking, the bald woman shuts him up. She scolds him for being a lucky brat who would have been dead if he had breathed that toxic air any longer. Since he also got kidnapped, she says he should be on his knees thanking the nice blonde guy. Then she kicks them both out, and her yelling is so loud that Rudo slams the door in her face. He tells Engine he's thankful for covering the bill, but right now, all he wants is information. He says he doesn't have time to get caught up in any gang. Engine calmly reminds him that he's a spherate and he's already seen what happens when people like him get caught. Then with a straight face, Engine says this isn't the kind of place where people just hand out information for free. He takes Rudo into a neon city that looks like something out of a cyberpunk dream and buys him a Big Mac. As Rudo wolfs it down like he hasn't eaten in days, he can't believe it. He thought the pit was just full of trash, but here's a real city with real food. Engine asks his name and says it's pretty manly. Then he gives Rudo a quick rundown of life on the ground. He explains that it's not just piles of trash they're dealing with here. There are piles of dark feelings too, and the people here call that energy anema. Engine explains that anema is a kind of energy, and when it builds up too much, it can cause serious problems like turning into trash beasts. These monsters usually live in the dumps and attack people on sight, but every now and then they sneak into cities too. Hearing that, Rudo asks why people don't just stay locked up in cities where it's safer. Engine says that ground folks care too much about their freedom to hide away in one place forever. Then he tells Rudo that normal weapons don't work on trash beasts because their cores are made of anema. That's where Rudo's glove powers come in. As Rudo looks down at Recto's gloves, Engine explains that when someone takes care of an object for a long time, it absorbs their emotions and memories. That builds up anima inside it, and the object becomes something called a vital instrument. Just like how a chef has a favorite knife or how some people treat their old gear like treasure, these tools can turn into powerful weapons. Vital instruments are strong enough to destroy the core of a trash beast, but they're not easy to use. Most people can't even activate them. That's when Rudo realizes he's one of the rare few who can, and Engine says people like them are called givers. Seeing how serious this is, Rudo thinks back to what Recto always told him and finally understands it wasn't just a silly story. Engine puts it simply and says that the cleaners fight to keep the trash beasts out of the city, and right now they're short on givers, and that's why he wants Rudo to join the team. Rudo asks if Engine will really teach him how to climb back up if he agrees to join the team. Engine shrugs and finally admits he actually has no clue if going back is even possible. That makes Rudo angry, but Engine quickly adds that maybe his big boss knows something about it. Then Engine notices the worn-out gloves on Rudo's hands and gets curious. He asks who gave them to him, and Rudo quietly replies that they came from his father. Engine nods and says the rich never seem to get it. If something really matters, you should take care of it. He looks at the gloves with respect and says they definitely have a spirit in them. Hearing that, Rudo starts thinking about the past, but as Engine turns to leave, Rudo stops him and says he should have mentioned it earlier, but he really does owe him his life. Engine accepts the thanks and tosses him a sack of money, telling him to spend it wisely. Surprised by the amount, Rudo asks if he's really okay handing it over. Engine casually says it's just the money he made from selling Rudo's clothes, and that's also how he paid for the treatment and the food. That really ticks Rudo off, but before he can blow up, Engine runs away and shouts that Rudo is seriously slow if it took him this long to figure it out. He tells him to wait there while he goes to get his trainer. As he leaves, Rudo swears to leave this dumb team the moment he learns how to climb back up. Just then, a cat decides it's the perfect time to steal the money and runs off with the sack in its mouth. Rudo makes a run for it and follows the cat into an alley, where he notices a stick sticking out of the wall and picks it up without thinking much of it. As the cat slips for a second while trying to jump off a trash bin, Rudo quickly uses the stick to pin it down and manages to snatch his money back. Just then, a stranger shows up and tells Rudo to return what belongs to him. Thinking he's talking about the money, Rudo calls him stupid and says it's his money, but the guy calmly replies that he meant the stick. Rudo laughs and says it's just a dumb stick, but the way he says it clearly gets on the guy's nerves. Without saying another word, the stranger shoves Rudo aside, snatches the stick back, and then starts sniffing it like a complete weirdo. That's when Rudo notices the emblem on his clothes. It's the same one Engine wore. That's when he realizes he might have picked a fight with the wrong person. Before he can say sorry, the guy powers up as a giver and slams the now glowing stick into the ground, his blue light flashing in front of Rudo as the man tells him to get ready for what's coming. The man calls the boy by his name and says that Engine already told him everything. Then he adds that he's part of the Akuta cleaners and has been assigned to train this newbie. He introduces himself as Zanka Nijuku and gives Rudo a quick reminder not to mess with things that belong to others. Rudo explains that he only used the stick to get his money back from a thieving cat, but Zanka doesn't look impressed. Instead, he tells Rudo to pass a message to his father, saying he didn't raise him right. That one really hits a nerve. Rudo's face tightens and it looks like he's about to snap. But then he remembers something, a quiet moment with Recto, where he told him to stay calm when things get heated and try to think about how the other person might be feeling. As that memory plays in his head, Rudo takes a deep breath and slowly cools off. He figures Zanka's probably angry because he did take something that mattered to him. And honestly, if someone tried to take his gloves, he'd be mad too. So following his dad's advice, Rudo swallows his pride and gives a quiet, honest apology. He says he never meant to steal something important, and that seems to settle the air a little. Hearing that, the glow around Zanka's staff fades away. He says it's fine since Rudo gave it back and even apologized. Then he admits he got a little too worked up and didn't mean to scare his new student. Rudo stands there stunned, not just because he avoided getting smacked, but because it's the first time one of Recto's lessons actually worked. Zanka offers him a hand, saying they'll be comrades from now on, and pulls him to his feet. After that, Zanka asks what weapon Rudo uses and what kind of power it has. Rudo scratches his head and says he's not exactly sure. Even so, Zanka says his gloves look pretty cool, which completely stuns Rudo. He suddenly remembers how Recto always told him to stop looking like a serial killer and try smiling more. So right there, he does his best to smile just like he practiced before. Zanka stares at him in shock. The next second, he goes wild, yelling at Rudo for disrespecting him with a face like that. Rudo panics and tries to explain that it was actually a smile. Zanka shakes his head and says that was the creepiest smile he's seen in his life. Thinking maybe it's a problem with his eyes, Rudo tries again with a new expression, but this time it's even worse. Seeing that, Zanka's jaw tightens and he asks if the kid wants to fight. The two start bickering like kids in a playground until Zanka gets serious. He tells Rudo that talent isn't enough. You can't just work for your own goals while others risk their lives every day to protect people. And if Rudo isn't even ready to talk about what he's fighting for, then maybe that goal isn't worth much either. Hearing Zanka call Recto's final wish worthless, Rudo finally snaps and tells him to shut up. He says he's dead serious about this and won't let anyone talk down on it. Zanka smirks and says he could tell from the moment they met that they weren't going to get along. Rudo agrees and raises his weapon, ready to prove his point. That's when Zanka notices something strange. Rudo isn't just using his gloves, he's holding another weapon entirely. Something clicks for him that Rudo might have the power to turn anything he touches into a vital instrument. Zanka laughs, saying this kid is way too broken, but it still doesn't matter. In the end, talent like his can't compare to raw experience. The next moment, Zanka's stick slams into the ground right in front of Rudo. Then he rushes in with a flurry of heavy swings, forcing Rudo back step by step. While beating him down, Zenka mocks him and says it's kind of sad getting smacked around by something as weak as a stick. Rudo finally gets a hit and that barely scrapes Zenka's cheek, but before he can follow it up, the man slams his staff down with one clean strike and floors him. Zenka chuckles and starts thinking maybe this kid's power isn't such a big deal after all. But then he sniffs something weird. Looking down at the mark on his cheek, his whole face twists in horror. Turns out Rudo wasn't just using any old stick. He was fighting with a toilet plunger. And now Zenka has poop on his face. Seeing that, Zenka begs Rudo to stop, but Rudo ignores the clean freak's protests and keeps swinging the plunger at him like it's a legendary sword. Zenka, who was all confident a second ago, suddenly shifts to defense mode, dodging every strike with panic in his eyes. Watching him run around like that makes Rudo wonder why this goofy weapon is actually working so well. He charges after his trainer, who now looks more like a victim begging for his life than a skilled warrior. The chase goes on until they burst out of the alley, and right then, the same cat from earlier jumps in and makes Zenka slip on the ground. Rudo swings again, and this time the plunger splashes straight onto Zenka's clothes, leaving him soaked in filth and completely defeated. After some time, Engine pulls up and casually asks if he's late, and if the two have already become best friends. As they fill them in during the ride, Engine laughs so hard he nearly crashes the truck and jokes that Rudo sealed the deal with full-on poop barrage. Zenka sits in silence, covering his face in shame, while Rudo stays hunched over in an awkward pose, slowly realizing how silly the whole fight turned out and how cocky he had gotten. Trying to lighten the mood, Engine turns to Rudo and says that Zenka is actually a solid guy and will be his teacher from now on. Hearing that, Zenka's mood shifts slightly as he perks up a bit, clearly pleased with the praise. Just then, a red-haired girl named Rio pops up in the back seat like she's been there all along. She says she got curious and wanted to see what the fuss was about, and starts playing with Rudo's hair like they've known each other for years, while Rudo sits there confused, thinking maybe life down in the pit isn't all bad after all. As Engine keeps driving, he tells them that their next stop is Cleaner's HQ. While Rio keeps playing with Rudo's hair, they arrive at a junkyard full of ruined buildings and mountains of wrecked cars outside a walled base. After Engine drives through the gate and parks inside, Rio dusts off her hands on the way out, looking satisfied, while Rudo just stands there looking stunned by the giant building that turns out to be the Cleaner's HQ. When they head inside, Rio waves him goodbye and Engine calls Rudo over to the front desk, where he introduces him to a woman named Semu. But during the introduction, Semu suddenly stabs her fork inches from his neck, not at him, but at the annoying flies buzzing nearby, leaving both him and Engine speechless. Then she warmly welcomes the new recruit and says that while she already heard about his talent and where he came from Engine, she still wants to check his potential herself. Engine explains that Semu's vital instrument is her special pair of glasses that let her see deep inside people to read their true abilities. Rudo is surprised that vital instruments like that even exist. When she activates her glasses and her eyes glow gold, she briefly enters Rudo's mind, but she gets instantly pushed out. Seeing that, Engine asks what she saw, and she explains that he is good at physical things and has a strong bond with his vital instrument. But the problem is that the connection is unstable, which means he still needs training to fully control it. When Semu glances to the side, Engine asks if something else is wrong, and she casually says he has some poo stuck on his neck, which makes Engine burst out laughing, that it's no wonder the flies kept buzzing around him, and he teases Rudo that he needs to stop playing in the dumps. After he thanks her, Engine takes him to meet the boss, but on the way out he notices that Semu's expression is still serious. As they walk, Engine explains that there are around 100 cleaners in total doing different jobs, but most of them are usually out handling work all over the pit. With that said, Engine offers to introduce Rudo to some of the others and opens the door to a nearby room, thinking it will be mostly empty, but when over a dozen cleaners are inside, giving them cold stares, he quickly shuts the door and says they can do that later. After that, they reach the boss's room, and just before Rudo can walk in like an idiot, Engine stops him, knowing full well Rudo is probably about to barge in and demand to know how to return to the sphere. He warns him that nothing comes free down here and that Rudo will need to earn information by doing work first. Then he reminds him that while he chose to reveal his own vital instrument, it is an unspoken rule not to ask others about theirs, especially not the boss who keeps his secret. Even so, the cleaners trust him anyway. After taking a deep sigh, Rudo finally walks into the room only to see it completely empty. Right then, Semu shows up and casually says she forgot to mention the boss is out. Rudo is disappointed, which makes Engine smile, and he then asks her when the boss will be back, but Semu simply shrugs. Engine is irritated at the boss, who should respect time a little, considering he is supposed to be the leader. Just then, Rio sneaks up from behind and suggests our boy tag along with her as a trainee on her works, since he cannot join the cleaners until the boss arrives. She gets into an uncomfortable position and argues that she wants to know more about him. After she takes him in, they start to discuss the client's request, that a nearby town is facing the threat of some small trash beasts approaching it. and they simply want to dispose of them. Rudo then asks what this polluted zone is, and Semu looks at Engine, asking him why he still hasn't told the newbie about it. Engine explains that he did mention it but renamed it the dump area to make it sound easier. Semu calls the guy a half-wit and turns to Rudo in order to explain. She tells him that the ground is divided into two zones, one of which is the safe zone, inhabited by humans, and the other is home to the trash beasts called the polluted zone. She further adds that the place he unexpectedly landed in was a very special polluted zone called No Man's Land. There are currently 4 of these, and most humans are bound to die in that area as they are full of ginormous trash beasts that even the givers have a tough time fighting. She tells the boy that he was lucky Engine somehow wandered off to such a place, and then asks him what he was doing there. Engine intervenes with a stupid, meaningless argument, and the receptionist then takes out a mask from under the desk and hands it over to Rudo. She asks him to put it on whenever he is in the polluted zone, as breathing the toxic atmosphere there can make him dangerously ill. She elaborates that without this mask, a person would die in no man's land in about 15 minutes. As the story progresses, the gang has already headed over to the quest place, and all of the cleaners are wearing these masks. Rio tells our boy that it would be an easy job, but she still wants him to pay attention. Rudo looks at the trash zone in front of him, wondering just how long he had breathed the air while he was in there. However, this place is exactly how he had pictured the pit to be when he was back up in the sphere, as there was no information about people living down here. But still, his eyes sparkle when he looks at the trash, because for a trash thief, this place is no less than a treasure trove. Rudo asks Rio who the people alongside them are, and Rio explains that they are merely supporters, as they do not have powers like them. One of the supporters greets Rudo and extends his hand for a shake, and when Rudo does the same, he ends up getting his hand gripped tightly. Rio tells our boy that this supporter has a beyond human grip strength, which is powerful enough to even smash a trash beast's outer shell. Rudo worries that he might not even be able to keep up with these people, but he still decides to pay close attention so he can watch and learn. Just then, the supporters give them a heads up, and the trash beasts start popping out in front of them. Rudo panics when he sees a whole herd of goat-like trash beasts, arguing that no one mentioned they would have to fight this many, but Rio tells him to stop worrying, as these are just slowpokes and pretty weak monsters. The trash beasts try their best to attack the barricade, but they barely even make a dent. Rio calls Rudo lucky that he gets the chance to watch and learn. Just then, a larger, bull-sized trash beast shows up, and Rudo panics again when he sees it, arguing that they should call for reinforcements. However, Rio tells him to take it easy. She says she doubts the herd will get any bigger than this, and if they can round them up quickly, they could head home early. Then out of nowhere, Rio smiles and says she wants to throw him a welcome party once they get back, but he replies that he is not even an official member yet. So she suggests a different kind of party, deeply concerning how she can be so chill on the battlefield. Rio sighs when she hears that and gives him advice that staying calm is the most important thing in the underground. That one line snaps him back to focus, but the mood dies down instantly as a giant beast suddenly smashes through the wall beside them. Rudo tries to stay calm and tells himself it will be fine, but when he looks at Rio, she is stoked by the cool monster because even though it is not ideal for training, strong enemies get her heart pounding. Seeing how pumped she is to fight the behemoth, Rudo keeps repeating like a broken record that all is okay. After that, he notices the scissors in Rio's hands start to glow. As a whole horde of beasts charge her way, she tosses the scissors into the air, and they transform into a massive pair mid-air. Rio lands right in the middle of the enemies and cuts through the trash bowls all around using just her feet, leaving Rudo stunned. The supporter explains that Rio is called the Ripper, and she is one of the rare cleaners who use their vital instrument with their feet. While Rudo watches in awe, the supporter warns him not to space out and stops the bull rushing at him from behind. After crushing its face with raw grip strength, the guy yeets it over to Rio, who slices it clean down the center and tells him to keep them coming. So while Rudo stands there, he watches the supporters weaken the beasts and toss them to Rio like the dream team. He is blown away by how amazing real cleaners are and suddenly remembers the time he said like a fool that he would offer help just to get what he wanted. With the small fry cleaned up, Rio turns toward the big one right as it slams down in front of her. The supporters quickly move out to stop the others from joining the fight. At that moment, Rio notices one of the beasts is still alive and rushing toward a supporter who tripped over its horn. Just as the guy thinks it is over, Rudo blocks the monster from gobbling him because if he wants the cleaners to share their intel, he cannot afford to be dead weight. In order to prove his worth, Rudo lights up his power in a reddish aura as the weapon he's holding gets imbued with his energy, and its shape changes into a web-like pattern. At that moment, Rudo starts to think about how he is actually using his power and gets scared, realizing that he has no clue how to tap into it. The monster keeps pushing forward and manages to break his weapon. Just then, Rio steps in and tells the boy that he has done a great job. The supporters apologize for their carelessness and ask Rio about the update on the huge trash beast. Rio explains that it is not a typical monster, as no matter how many times she cuts it in half, it still won't go down. The supporters then head back to alert the surrounding towns and the base about this new monster, while Rio gets back to the fight. She jumps on top of it and starts chopping the thick wires on its head, and finds something shining there. She wonders what that is and decides to destroy it, but the monster shakes its head and throws her away. After that, it regrows its hair and starts powering up and goes berserk. The impact of the beast's attack shatters the ground as its attack reaches Rudo and the other cleaner. Rudo barely manages to dodge and ends up falling down into the pit created by the monster's attack, while wondering how useless he is right now. Just then, a supporter picks him up and makes a run for it. While he runs away, he cheers Rudo up by telling him to continue working towards his goal once he has decided upon it. Just then, Rio manages to spot the monster's weak point and strikes through the shining spot on its head with her massive clippers and finally takes it down. After the fight, she meets up with Rudo and the supporter and explains that the beast stopped moving when she stabbed through this rusty cutter, and this makes them wonder if it's a vital instrument and what it's doing inside a trash beast. At the same time, Red Shirt, who had been knocked out by Rudo, wakes up in shock to find a mysterious person sitting in front of him on a sofa. He asks who he is, but the man ignores the question and instead demands to know the location of this ferret boy. Back at the cleaner's HQ, Zanka feels sleepy as he walks to the cafeteria and becomes surprised to see a party going on inside. He goes up to Rio and asks why everyone's up so late, and she replies they are throwing Rudo a welcome party, though most of them look like they just came to drink and blow off steam. Then he looks around and finds Rudo looking depressed with his face stuck to the table. Zanka notices that the guest of honor isn't even happy, and Rio explains it is because he couldn't use his vital instrument properly on the mission, and Zanka thinks he is pretty lame. After that, he asks Rio about the strange trash beast, and she explains that its core wasn't a normal item like usual. Instead, it was powered by a vital instrument, and this is the first time a vital instrument has spawned a trash beast. She says that she isn't sure what to do about it, so she stopped thinking about it, and that it's a problem for the higher-ups now, which means she can go home and enjoy dinner. Zanka is not surprised by her attitude, and she tells him that Engine and Simu will be coming soon as well. At the same time, Rudo silently stares at his gloves when a supporter named Grizz joins him at the table to thank him for his help. Grizz lets Rudo know he could see the effort he put in the fight, but Rudo says he did not do anything. When Grizz tells him he saved Follow's life, Rudo does not recognize the name, and Grizz explains that Follow was the young supporter with goggles who nearly got crushed if Rudo had not stopped the trash beast. Still, Rudo is frustrated that Rio had to bail him out because he could not use his power, and he was just like this on the surface, always losing control and having Recto bail him out. The reason he is mad at himself is that he always needs saving and never lives up to what is expected from him, but Grizz thanks him again, which stuns him. The man says that most cleaners think supporters are so weak that they are practically dead weight, dragging them down, and now most of the new recruits think that way as well, but Rudo is different. Grizz smiles as he says that Follow joined because he wanted to fight the monsters, but because he is powerless, he is working hard while caring for his object, hoping he will become a giver and get back at the givers who make fun of him for being a weakling. After that, he advises Rudo to forget about expectations and remember what his goal was from the start. Hearing that, Rudo wonders what it should be, and Grizz tells him to remember his regret when he was thrown in the pit, and his goal will naturally come to him. Finally, Grizz tells him to be confident and pats him on the head, which makes Rudo really emotional, but the moment is quickly ruined when Engine leans on him from behind. Engine is surprised that Rudo hasn't eaten yet, and Rio warns him that there won't be any food left for him, even though she's the one who ate most of it. With that said, Grizz invites Rudo to eat with him and the others, and Rudo is stunned when he sees everyone smiling at him warmly, so he happily goes along. After that, music starts playing and a strange guy begins spray painting on the wall. Engine tells Rudo to watch the name Gob closely because he's a man who does what he wants with confidence. As Gob paints, the crowd yells at him to stop because the paint stinks, but he keeps going. Engine asks him not to draw trash this time, but Gob grins and says he can't make promises. With a bright glint in his eye, Gob continues and Rudo is amazed by his dedication. Meanwhile, in the dark room, Red Shirt is injured from head to toe and begs the man to spare him since he has told him everything he knows. The evil man grants his wish by putting a blade in his mouth and swiftly pulling it out while repeating the description of Rudo that Red Shirt gave him. Later, when Semu gets back to the reception, she receives a call from a client and then calls in Zanka and Rudo, along with the supporters, to brief them about the request. Zanka complains to the receptionist about sending Rudo along since he has yet to officially join the cleaners. Semi replies that she has specifically called in Rudo because the request is quite related to him. She explains that a merchant got robbed of his cargo by a trash beast while traveling through the polluted zone and has now asked them to get his stuff back. She adds that the client is living with some spirit just like Rudo, which is why she thinks it might help Rudo get a hint about his way back to the surface. Grizz realizes that Rudo might be worried and tells him that he has the choice whether he wants to go or not. Rudo looks at his gloves thinking he might just end up getting in others' way, but still decides to take a shot at it and replies that he is ready to tag along. When Semu feels that Zanka might be uneasy, she finds a way to motivate him by telling him how Engine responded by saying that Zanka can handle everything. This changes the mood for Zanka as he cheerfully takes the role of a leader. On their way to the mission, Rudo asks Gris if he doesn't carry a weapon, to which Gris explains that he does have a spare knife, but he prefers fighting with bare fists. Follow teases Gris by revealing that he prays to some random talisman every time he leaves for battle, and while Gris is showing his item, suddenly they're startled by a stranger standing behind them wearing a scary mask. The stranger explains that she is the client and thanks everyone for coming for her request. She says that she will guide them to the trash beast's lair. Rudo gets excited and quickly asks a bunch of questions about the Spherit. The merchant lady simply replies that she was carrying her cargo when she came across the Spherit and took them in. But since they were unconscious, even she's worried about them. Rudo makes a serious face and asks if she plans on selling the Spherit. The merchant lady denies doing any such thing and makes it clear that she only has interest in Spherites. While the group follows the merchant, Zanka feels everything is suspicious since the trash beasts usually attack humans on sight and wonders why one would go as far as kidnapping a human instead of obliterating him. Just after a few steps, the merchant points at a building telling everyone that this is where she came across the trash beast. Zanka asks everyone to gear up since the trash beast could be hiding anywhere. Just as they hesitantly enter the building, they see someone at the opposite end, but before they can react, the merchant lady starts pushing them in that direction. By the time everyone realizes that the person at the opposite end is just a doll, it is already too late and the floor collapses, making everyone fall down while the merchant lady jumps back. After Rudo recovers, he wonders why the floor suddenly turned into mud, and the girl politely asks if they are fine. Gris angrily asks her where the Spherit she mentioned is, and she grins as she points at the Spherit in front of them and melts into mud. Then two shady figures walk toward them with purple lamps, and Zanka realizes it was all a trap by the raiders to catch the Spherit they are after, who is Rudo. Rudo gets confused about what raiders are, and Gris explains they were just petty bandits in the past. But their tactics changed over the last few years after they began doing secret experiments, and the worst part is that they are all strong givers. Then he orders 3 of his men to find an escape route while he and Follow support Rudo. After that, he tells Zanka the strong ones are all his, making Rudo worry for a moment, but when Follow yells at him, he decides to run away with the others. As they run, Rudo says he can take them on, but Gris tells him raiders are no average kidnappers, and he has no idea what the raiders are capable of, which makes Rudo frustrated. At the same time, Zanka says he already knew it would not take long for the raiders to figure out there is a Spherit among the cleaners. He's surprised they found him so soon, but it makes sense since selling him could make them rich for a lifetime. However, the creepy lady reveals she has no intention of selling him. Instead, the raiders want information about the sphere, and the best way to get that is to ask a Spherit, especially to know how he survived crossing the barrier alive. As Zanka takes off his mask, he says he couldn't care less about the sphere and confirms there aren't any trash beasts around. The lady confirms it as she summons her mud dolls, and after seeing her power, Zanka quickly figures out that the ground turning into mud was her ability. Zanka quickly activates his vital instrument as he argues that dealing with her squishy mud marionettes won't be hard for him. The lady raider hides her other companion inside her mud monsters, and Zanka gets attacked from behind by him. Her companion mocks Zanka for forgetting him because of his overconfidence, and just then, the lady disguises the other raider back in her marionettes and plays a hide-and-seek game where Zanka has to figure out which one is actually him. Zanka moves his weapon in all directions, hoping to catch the other raider, but each time he ends up beaten up and finally gets pushed to the back. He gets very angry and makes a futile attempt to close in on the lady, but gets trapped in her mud. She explains how she has turned many parts of the ground into mud so that you won't be able to move much and will get stuck. The lady makes it clear that Zanka is the only one here who actually stands a chance against her, and once she deals with him, there will be no one in her way to kidnap the Spherite. Zanka shuts off the lady as he loudly states that her stupid tactics are irritating him a lot. It seems he has figured out her strategy and explains how she simply uses her shovel to control the mud, while her companion uses a vital instrument to deal damage. He adds that her companion is wearing snowshoes, which let him walk on the unstable ground, and now that he has figured out their tactics, he feels excited to take them down. The lady takes it as in mockery and warns Zanka that things are going to get tougher for him, but he stays confident and replies that he knows his vital instrument much better since he smells it and trains with it daily. The lady gets irritated by his long speech and sends her mud monsters to attack, but Zanka quickly picks up his rod and strikes it on the ground. He uses the sonic vibrations to locate the raiders and then dashes directly toward them, taking them both out in just a moment. As the lady goes down, all her pet monsters turn back into mud, and just when Zanka gets a bit cocky, he senses a strong presence behind him, which happens to be the evil man who was torturing the red shirt before. Meanwhile, Rudo and the supporters have made it to the exit door. Gris opens it and finds a staircase there that instructs the rest of the supporters to go up and call for backup while he stays behind to check on Zanka. Just then, they see someone hurrying toward them and assume it must be Zanka, thinking he has already dealt with the raiders. However, it turns out to be the boss of the enemy. The raider gives Rudo a careful look, confirming if he is their target. He leaps onto the exit door and smashes the wall, blocking the way out as he recognizes Rudo as the spirit giver. Gris Rubian warns him that Rudo is now part of the cleaners and that messing with him will make him the enemy of all of them. The bad guy ignores the warning and says he was late only because of his poor sense of direction. He claims that he never meant to give them this much time and then begins walking toward them. While Gris tries to ask him about Zanka's whereabouts, the raider brushes him off again and tells Rudo that there is somebody who wants to chat with him. The raider takes off Rudo's mask with force, telling him that there are no trash beasts here, and when Rudo asks about Zanka, the bad guy says that he went easy on him and only knocked him out, though the poison might be giving him a bad time. The raider then uses his vital instrument to transform the rings on his fingers into sharp claws as he warns Rudo to come along quietly. Both supporters jump on him to try and hold him down, but they fail and are slammed hard to the ground. As the boss prepares his claws again, Gris steps in front of Rudo, vowing to protect his team at all costs. The boss lowers his claws and mocks what he has heard about these so-called weak supporters the cleaners have, saying they are useless and cannot protect anything. Rudo tells Gris to fall back since he cannot fight the raider unarmed and insists he can handle him himself. The boss then asks Rudo to promise he will not get mad and reveals that he has already murdered Gris with an attack no one could even see. The raider stabs his claws through Gris and declares that weaklings like him are completely worthless. Gris's lucky charm falls as he dies and Rudo quickly reaches out to catch it. Rudo's memory flashes back to the time when Recto came home and found him banging his head against the wall like a lunatic, blood running all over his face. After laying the little boy down, Recto asks why he did it, and Rudo replies that Recto taught him never to hurt others. Seeing the boy harm himself instead gives Recto a headache, but he sits down and asks what made him do this, even after the pain in his hands had started to fade and he was avoiding people. Rudo says there is nothing in particular, but the only thing he carries is a burning hate inside, and even if someone asks him why, he cannot put it into words. Hearing that, Recto understands the boy thinks his parents abandoned him and now believes he is worthless because of it, and a child like him cannot handle such heavy emotions. Then Rudo asks what worthless really means, but Recto decides to patch him up and take him outside, since one of the reasons behind Rudo's sadness is not having anything fun to do. He should discover everything out there until he finds something he can truly enjoy. Recto hypes him up, saying there will be a day when his empty room is filled with things he loves, but makes him promise to warn him in advance if he ever wants to bring a girl back home. After that, they head to the backwater village's library to read books, and then he tries teaching Rudo soccer, but the innocent boy feels bad for the ball and starts patting it. Next, they try cooking, and Rudo shows he is very good at cutting vegetables, so good that he even cuts through the board. Thinking about the epic fail, Recto is glad the little boy at least showed some energy, and they have lots of time to find what he enjoys. Just then, Rudo sees a villager throwing away trash and asks Recto what he is doing. He finds the discarded items so fascinating that he barges through the door and dives into the dumpster. By the time Recto catches up, he sees the boy bawling his eyes out while holding tightly to the object, leaving Recto confused about what kind of emotion he is even feeling. Rudo cries that it is horrible that the object with a long life ahead was thrown away simply because it is slightly broken. He yells nonstop that he wants to fix it, and Recto realizes Rudo is not just projecting his feelings about himself, but he actually sees worth in things others already consider worthless. Back in the present, Rudo awakens the power inside Gris's lucky charm, and Gris, who is still holding onto life, finally understands why he could never activate it before. No one had ever truly understood its nature until now. Rudo's ability does not simply turn random objects into vital instruments. Instead, it brings out their true hidden worth. Rudo transforms the lucky charm into a defensive weapon with a large eye, and instead of panicking, the bad guy just drools over it. The bad guy grows curious and asks Rudo if this is his vital instrument, as he gets eager to know everything about it. Meanwhile, the other supporter carries Gris to safety and tries to give him a little first aid. Rudo remembers how Gris was the reason he realized what he truly wanted to do, and if Gris hadn't made him see that, he would still be lost. Thinking this, Rudo braces himself to strike the enemy hard. The raider says he loves strong givers and holds out his claws, introducing himself as Jabberwonger. Jabber says he wants to have some fun and asks Rudo his name. After the introduction, he gets excited like a maniac, saying that he wants both of them to tear each other apart, and then dashes toward Rudo. On the other hand, the other supporter struggles to hold off Gris, but the blood keeps flowing heavily. Gris watches Rudo fighting and realizes that the reason he couldn't fight before was that his emotions had clouded his main purpose, but now there's nothing left to distract him. Back in the fight, Jabber jumps back and clings to the wall as he asks Rudo why he isn't coming to him. Rudo tells him to come himself, and the raider does just that, leaping over Rudo with a powerful attack. However, he finds himself landing on the floor as Rudo has already dodged it somehow. Jabber continues with a barrage of attacks, but Rudo dodges every single one. Finally, when Jabber asks why his attacks don't even reach him, Rudo explains that his friend Grizz has prayed for everyone to return safe and sound, and safe means uninjured, which is why he is focused on defending so that none of the enemy's attacks can even touch him. Jabber says that Rudo's vital instrument seems to only increase his ability to dodge, and he tells Rudo how useless it would be if he couldn't even attack him. Rudo points out that Jabber has been missing the fact all along. It turns out that Rudo hasn't taken a single step, yet he is still dodging every attack, and the one moving all this time was Jabber himself, which means Rudo can predict every single move he makes. As Jabber rushes at him again, Rudo uses his vital instrument to paralyze him, and since his talisman cannot actually attack, he follows up with a punch to knock him away because fists are Grizz's preferred weapon, and he wishes to honor his comrade. The raider bleeds from his nose but still laughs like a maniac, impressed that Rudo used the big, scary instrument to guide his movements and finally strike him with his fist. Rudo reminds the guy that he was the one who wanted to have some fun, so he is more than happy to play along until he makes him a heap of trash lying on the ground. Hearing him throw mad disrespect really ticks Jabber off, and he jokes that Rudo is pretty cold-hearted for not feeling guilty about being a guy with no mercy. Right as Rudo tells him he is the only exception, Jabber appears behind him, ready to swing, but Rudo paralyzes him again and lands another brutal punch in his gut that sends Jabber and his creepy grin flying. The boss quickly recovers, though leaping around so fast that dust clouds form all around him, which makes it impossible for Rudo's eyes to follow, and Jabber's surprise attacks him by smashing pillars apart and hurling slabs at him from all directions. He finally forces Rudo to shield his eyes and charges in for the hit, but the Lucky Charm's eye freezes him once again, allowing Rudo to nearly bash his skull in, though Jabber manages to slip away at the last second. Laughing like a maniac, he charges back in, jumping around even faster than before, but the all-seeing eye freezes him the moment he gets close, and Rudo blasts the lunatic away once again. After that, the madman bounces around so fast that he looks like a blur, but Rudo continues blocking his attacks and pounding the stuffing out of him. While Jabber cackles in his madness, Rudo shuts him up with one last two-punch combo that knocks him out cold for a moment, causing him to stumble backward until he falls against the wall. Seeing him pant like a dog, Rudo tells him to just give up already, but Jabber only smiles because it has been a long while since he got beaten this badly, and he thinks Rudo probably enjoyed it too. Rudo is creeped out by his ugly expression, but suddenly the crazy guy gets serious and explains his theory that Rudo's vital instrument probably works by sensing the killing intent of an enemy and then moving them out of harm's way. However, he noticed when he was hurling the slabs of stone that things without bloodlust do not trigger the instrument at all. Then, with a twisted grin, he begins explaining the power of his own vital instrument Mankira, saying the right claw carries a poison strong enough to paralyze the target till it can barely breathe, before suddenly piercing it deep into his chest. Rudo stares in confusion as the madman laughs in pure enjoyment over the pain, and that is when Jabber explains that if he blacks out from the poison and his unconscious body fights on, there will be no killing intent to detect. As he expresses how excited he is to see what happens, his consciousness slowly fades away, and Rudo silently stares in horror as his body twitches. His eyes slowly roll back and the wall behind him shatters. After Jabber knocks himself out with his own poison, he suddenly lets out a loud scream with blank, lifeless eyes and charges at the boy with terrifying force. Rudo panics, realizing his opponent seems to be back at full power, and then notices that they're dangerously close to the supporters. If the madman gets near them, someone might get hurt, so Rudo starts running in the opposite direction to pull him away. Jabber chases after him, still screaming, and Rudo barely manages to knock him back, but the lunatic immediately gets up without missing a beat and screams again. That's when Rudo figures out that the madman wasn't lying when he said that he was going to use his own poison on himself, which means Rudo's weapon is now useless, since the talisman only reacts to hostility and Jabber's unconsciousness erases it. Rudo wonders just how much experience and willpower this crazy man has, then pauses and thinks if he's actually just a straight-up masochist. Rudo remembers how some bullies once called him a masochist while beating him up, and after they left, he went straight to his old man to ask what the word even meant, and now with Jabber getting back on his feet despite being knocked out, Rudo starts wondering if maybe he really is one of those masochists as Jabber charges at him again, forcing him to barely hold his ground and defend, while the madman completely overpowers him and is just about to drive the sharp blades on his face into him when a rod suddenly comes spinning and slams Jabber to the ground, pinning him down, and Rudo instantly recognizes the weapon as Zenka's before the man himself appears, insisting that he is not going to be brought down this easily, and tells Rudo to get ready for a tag. Rudo jumps back beside Zenka and points out that he looks like he is barely holding on, but Zenka brushes it off, saying he's fine and tells him to quit looking down on him. He then adds that it might be about time Rudo starts using the powers of his vital instrument since things are looking rough. Rudo argues that the real problem is that his ability will not work on the madman in his unconscious state, and right now, he is just barely dodging the attacks. When Zenka asks his vital instrument only works on hostility, our boy is caught off guard and questions how he even knew that. Zenka explains that he has been watching and analyzing the fight from the start, reminding him that he is his tutor after all. With that said, Zenka starts thinking to himself that while Rudo cannot attack, he, on the other hand, has been immobilized. That gives Zenka an idea, and the man asks Rudo to let him hit him. Hearing that, the boy wonders if he enjoys beating someone up like Jabber, but Zenka explains it is only an experiment. The boy asks what exactly his problem is, so Zenka explains that he wants to see if his vital instrument will activate if he strikes and moves him to the place he wants to be. If that happens, then he can use his long stick to outplay the madman. Rudo points out that he will get hit for no reason if it doesn't work, and Zenka replies that it's just too bad. Just then, Jabber breaks free from the stick and charges straight at them, destroying a thick pillar with a single swipe of his claws. While they step out of the way, Zenka orders Rudo to make sure the claws do not scratch him, because even the slightest touch will leave him wriggling on the ground. The broken weapon ticks Zenka off, and Rudo mocks him. Hearing that, Zenka makes it clear Rudo was asking for it and leaps at the boy to beat him up, but the all-seeing eye freezes him midair and throws him right at Jabber, allowing him to smack the guy into the next wall. The cleaner duo stares in shock at how that even worked, but Rudo is angry that Zenka genuinely tried to hurt him. His teacher plays it off as a necessary experiment, and then he realizes they are going to make a great team and looks forward to going all out and having some real fun. As Jabber rises and charges at full speed, Zenka prepares to bash Rudo's head like a watermelon. That allows the boy to use his power to send him flying straight into the boss, crushing the guy hard into the ground. Zenka is impressed by the range, but he tells Rudo to be a little gentle. Rudo replies that gentle does not exist in his vocabulary, and he runs straight at Zenka, who is furious and ready to beat him up once again. Like before, Rudo launches him off at breakneck speed into the poor boss, but even though Jabber tries to counter, he gets swatted away once again. But Zenka ruthlessly follows it up with another strike that home runs the guy into the roof, and then he tries to go for a satisfying finisher. But before it lands, Rudo twists him to keep the suffering going. That third attack blasts Jabber into the wall so hard that the madman finally regains his consciousness and says hi to Mr. Bad Attitude, who smashes him into the hard concrete. After that, Zenka lands and falls back because the constant flying has exhausted him, and now his whole body hurts. At the same time, Rudo's power shuts off and Griss's lucky charm crumbles into dust. Seeing that, Rudo feels sad over losing the precious thing Griss trusted him with and wonders what he should do now. As Zenka thinks that the vital instruments he makes might only last for a limited time, Rudo suddenly starts shaking and choking before he collapses to the ground. Taking a closer look, Zenka sees a scratch on his back, and when he turns around, he sees Jabber stab himself with his left claw like before. The boss casually walks toward Rudo, so Zenka asks in confusion how he can still move after being beaten up like that, thinking his left claw can heal injuries. But Jabber explains that it definitely does not heal injuries, but it does take the pain away. Jabber admits he never thought he would be cornered this badly and gives his thanks for giving him such a fighting experience. He argues that the poison on his right claws only works on him for about 10 minutes since he is used to it, but for Zenka it should last around 30 minutes, and therefore he gives him another dose, which renders Zenka unconscious once again. He mutters that if he fails to achieve his real goal of kidnapping, he will just end up being scolded. The raider then picks up Rudo and carries him away while Zenka lies there helplessly watching. As Jabber runs with Rudo, he briefly remembers his minions but forgets them just as quickly, while Rudo struggles to move but cannot. The boy worries that because of him, Griss and the others got hurt. Jabber smiles and leaps up, but he realizes they are suddenly outside instead of still being in a building. Looking around, he spots Rio standing with her scissors, and before he can react, an umbrella strikes him and throws him back, making him drop Rudo. Engine steps in, saying they have some cleaning to do, while the raider lies there knocked out. Engine explains that the building is buried deep below, and they cannot use the choker there to contact the outside. He scolds the raider for deliberately trapping their friends underground to cut off communication. Luckily, the supporters who escaped earlier, including Tom, managed to find his cell phone in the nearest town and call for backup, because otherwise no one would have noticed. Tom argues that Griss and Zenka should still be down there and worries they might have been gone for too long, but Engine tells them to stop worrying since those two are not that weak. He instructs the girl to take a few supporters and go down to check on them while he manages the raider. Jabber interrupts, arguing that he's being looked down on like some throwaway trash and claims that the whole thing excites him. Engine feels for poor Rudo, who has been stuck fighting such a strange madman all along, and the other cleaners get angry at Jabber for for hurting their friends. Engine warns the villain that they are not letting him off the hook so easily, but Jabber seems unaffected and insists that he has a duty to bring Rudo home, saying that even if he wants to run, it is simply not an option. Just then, Jabber gets hugged from behind by a girl named Thony, who tells him it is time for him to return with an ice-cold stare. He snaps back and tells the midget to get out of his face because he does not want to go back, not until he has Rudo with him. While she calmly points out that cleaner reinforcements are coming any minute now, Engine is left stunned at where she even came from. In frustration, Jabber yells at her that he cannot leave right after the fun has started, but he falls silent when she says their leader had a big smile on his face. The bones in his body crack as he forcibly tries to break free, but the girl's grip is stronger. After struggling for a while, he finally gives up and flashes a big dumb grin at everyone, apologizing that it is a shame he has to go home when things were just heating up. While Rio is shocked to see a manhole in the wall behind the two, Jabber takes a second to compliment Rudo for putting up a really good fight for a sphere dweller, thinking the boy is probably in a coma from the poison. Jabber tells Engine to send him his regards, but it completely shocks him when he sees Rudo move in his condition. Rudo swears they are not over until he pays him back for Gris's lucky charm, and his feisty spirit fires the guy up. But when the man looks at the pattern on Rudo's gloves, he is surprised to see the boy also has something from the series. He finds the coincidence wild and says his boss will be very happy to hear about the gloves. With that, he promises he will be far more prepared the next time he comes to grab him and tells him to take good care of his gloves before stepping into the portal. After that, the manhole vanishes into thin air and leaves everyone stunned while Rudo quietly wonders what the series even is. Later, the medical team arrives and Rudo rushes to Grizz when he finds him looking like he has seen better days. His poor condition brings Rudo to tears, and the boy apologizes for breaking his precious lucky charm. The man replies that it meant a lot to him, making Rudo feel even worse for turning it to dust, but Grizz goes on to say that he is glad Rudo was able to survive because of it. Back at the Cleaners HQ, Engine sits next to Rudo, who looks down in the dumps and asks what he is doing. Rudo gives no response, so Engine tells the boy he heard that he finally figured out how to use his vital instrument and gives him a small compliment. But Rudo suddenly yells that Grizz was badly injured and he does not know how to face him after everything that happened. He admits with regret that he could never help anyone back on the sphere and he feels just as useless when it matters now in the underground. Rudo curses at himself, thinking he will never be able to change in his entire life. Hearing that, Engine calmly tells him that Grizz was ready to risk his life for his comrades, so he did not protect Rudo because he was special. He protected him because he believed in Rudo. With that said, Engine tells him to stop whining and go talk to Grizz in the hospital. At the hospital, Rudo's jaw drops to the floor when he sees Grizz look perfectly fine, and the man congratulates him with a big smile for awakening his power. Rudo cannot believe his eyes and takes another look. Engine suddenly bursts into laughter when he realizes Rudo was depressed because he thought Grizz had kicked the bucket, and he keeps patting the innocent kid, who is now dying of embarrassment. Rudo shouts back at Grizz that anyone would assume he died after suffering a wound that bad. However, Grizz explains he survived thanks to the Cleaners' medical team, and the real savior was the shy girl standing beside his bed. Then Grizz introduces Ishia, the only giver whose power helps her heal others. Hearing him talk about her, the girl gets embarrassed and insists she only got lucky. Engine explains that she is super shy and cannot handle compliments, and Grizz proves it by thanking her again for saving his life, which makes her go red like a tomato. After that, he tells Follow he should not feel guilty either, because he also saved him from the raiders' deadly attack. His kind words move the young supporter to tears, and then he turns back to Rudo to give respect for giving the raider a good beating with Zanka. After that, Grizz goes on to tell Rudo to forget about his lucky charm because he happily gave it away, knowing Rudo can appreciate its true value. Rudo's guilt fades away on hearing that, and he says he is glad Grizz survived. Then Engine tells everyone the fight between the raiders and the Cleaners has started, so trash beasts will not be their only enemies on the battlefield moving on. Right as he reveals he has some new information, a huge man enters the room and says it seems the raiders are also after the sphere. When Rudo quickly asks who he is, Engine casually replies that he is the boss. It takes Rudo a solid minute to process the fact that the boss is standing right in front of him. The boss apologizes to Rudo for being gone when he first joined, and he introduces himself as Arca Corvus. He argues that even if he doesn't look like one, he is still the boss, and explains that at first he thought he was only sticking with them for information. And if that had been the case, he wouldn't have kept him around. But he admits he appreciates the way Rudo put his life on the line for his friends and acknowledges that he has the strength to make a real contribution to the team. Because of that, Corvus gladly accepts him as part of the group and tells him to meet him at his office, where he has already prepared a uniform and information for him. When Rudo gets there, Corvus explains about a border that exists between the ground and the sphere, where anyone who tries to cross it is destined to die. As Rudo takes on his new suit, the boss tells him a story about a woman who lived in the Forbidden Zone, which is the area closest to the border. Once she saved a lost traveler who asked her what she was doing there, and she replied that she spent her days watching the spirits fall from above. Over the years, she claimed to have seen some people who were able to go back and forth across the border without dying. Hearing this, Rudo realizes he has to find those people to learn how they managed such a feat and to finally understand why he didn't die when he fell. When Corvus asks him if he plans to stay or go, Rudo grinds his teeth and answers with certainty that he is going back. The door suddenly bursts open and Engine walks in and gets excited to see Rudo wearing the uniform. Later, Rudo tries to sneak toward the Forbidden Zone as he is determined to find the woman and gather information, but Follow tries to drag him back, begging him to stop. Rudo, however, refuses to wait since all he wants is to find the way back as quickly as possible. Engine steps in and tells him to calm down, saying that if he really wants to go there, then at least he should be prepared first. He asks Rudo if he plans on heading there without gathering any information or testing his powers, questioning if he has some sort of death wish. Engine tries to make him realize that he has to understand his weaknesses and limits, and when Rudo asks if he will be going with him, Engine answers yes and warns that going alone would only be suicide. As Rudo thinks about how Engine once went there by himself, Engine himself explains that apart from hunting, cleaners also need to collect intel on trash beasts as well as raiders. Rudo complains about how terrible people like the raiders could ever become givers, but Engine tells him plainly that not everyone is kind or caring. He explains that there are good-looking men who throw their things away carelessly and rough-looking ones who take care of what they have. He makes clear that being a giver has nothing to do with being good or bad. Rudo lowers his head gloomily, wondering if he did something wrong, yet still he cannot forgive the people who sent him here. Engine then tells him to rest for the day. Back in his room, Rudo is bored out of his mind and wishes he could do something fun, like diving into dumpsters, when Rio suddenly pops in and excitedly offers to give him a tour of the HQ. She shows him the gym, the cafeteria, even the men's toilet for some reason, and then explains that while the place looks run down, the people here give it life. But Rudo argues that life on the sphere was much more lively, and tells her he spent every day going out with Recto, finding treasure in trash, and getting cursed at by the police. Hearing that, Rio says there are plenty of people here who would gladly curse at him too, and then changes the topic to food, asking if he has ever tasted sweets. Rudo is shocked when he hears her say sweets because that was something only rich people could eat, but Rio brags that they have the good stuff down here as well. After that, Rudo's eyes nearly pop out when he sees shiny candy the cleaners buy from people called vianders, and he tells Engine he has never tried them in his whole life. Engine replies that while things are different above in the underground, there is more demand for candy than drugs, so it would be smart not to get addicted. While Rio drools over a whole plate of sweet goodness, Engine explains that the vianders recruit top-tier cooks, so their candy is even better than on the sphere. Next, Rio tempts Rudo to give it a taste, and he slowly raises a piece to his mouth, trembling with excitement. At that moment, Rudo's soul nearly ascends to heaven and starts devouring candy like the Cookie Monster, because it is so good his hands move on their own. Seeing that, Engine warns him to slow down or he will put on weight, but the thing that finally stops him is an ice-cold stare coming from a kid sucking on a pacifier. The look in his eyes makes Rudo wonder if he is after his sweets too, so he forces himself to hand over a lollipop to his fellow sweet enjoyer. But the kid slaps it out of his hand and rudely orders Rudo to give him another, which really gets on his nerves. Later, Zenka overhears Engine and Rio talking about Rudo's candy addiction, but he decides to ignore it until he sees a ball of fat squeeze out of the doorway in front of him. He yells that there is an intruder, only to realize it is a Rudo with diabetes. The next day at the training hall, Rudo struggles during the test to confirm if he can use his power at will and wonders why he cannot do it, even after getting used to it. Zanka brings him a bunch of trash and tells him to pick whatever he wants to try again. Rudo picks up a triangular piece of metal and pours his power into it, and this time it actually works as the item grows a little bigger. Engine admits that Zanka might have been right and gives him credit as a tutor. Zanka then suggests that Rudo should try weaponizing multiple things at once, and to their surprise, it works. First with a teapot, then with a doll, but just as Rudo pulls out the third one, his nose starts bleeding and he collapses to the floor. Engine points out that the same thing happened before when his nose bled, which means the gloves might be too good in quality for his body to handle. He explains that the longer someone takes care of things, the better they become and the greater power they can hold. He adds that besides power, the reflected ability also depends on the user's thoughts and experience. Zanka assumes that Rudo must have been looking after those gloves since childhood, which explains their quality, though he still wonders if they could really be taking such a toll on his body. That thought makes him uneasy as he starts thinking about some serious item stuff. Rudo argues back that if this is true, then why do the things he weaponizes always end up perishing? Yet when the ones he just created remain intact, he suggests there might be a time limit on them. Rio then speaks up and says it could be because those things had no regrets. She smiles and tells him that his ability seems to draw out the maximum value from things that were thrown away. Since Rudo uses them again, those things fulfill their purpose, and Zenka couldn't agree more as he points out how the talisman crumbles once Rudo feels relief after the fight. Engine says that Rudo hasn't broken Grizz's talisman or any weapon he crafts, but instead, Rudo makes use of what is left and pushes their value to the max. Looking at his gloves, Rudo realizes his power was never about destroying things in the first place. Rio then voices what Zenka has in mind, mentioning how the raider claims the gloves are part of a series, which makes them believe there might be more like them. While Rudo questions why, Rio suggests he should give them a name since they have already named theirs and Engine agrees. Meanwhile, Kthumni and Jabber return to their boss, who starts blabbing his mouth about a Desert Altar equipment series and a Watchman series, which he himself seems to be wearing. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.